welcome to the BBC News at 1. The first of the NHS's Nightingale hospitals has been opened, set up to expand capacity during the coronavirus outbreak. It's been built in less than a fortnight inside the BSL Conference Centre in East London, and the first patients are due to arrive early next week. Prince Charles took part in the opening ceremony via video link from his home in Scotland. Work is already underway to create similar hospitals in Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow and Cardiff, and others are planned for Bristol and Harrogate. Our correspondent Angus Crawford reports from East London.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the wonders of modern technology can only do so much, and I can't quite reach, perhaps I could invite Nightingale's head of nursing, Natalie Gray, on my behalf, to unveil the plaque to declare NHS Nightingale Hospital open.
A royal opening from lockdown. At his home in Scotland, Prince Charles, still recovering from the virus, paid tribute to staff here and around the country.
But everyone can now have the reassurance that they will receive all the necessary technical care they may need and every chance to return to a normal life. This hospital, therefore, offers us an intensely practical message of hope for those who will need it most at this time of national suffering.
An empty shell just days ago. Look, an army of civilian contractors and the military have built Nightingale from scratch, wards stretching the length of the building. 500 beds to start with, increasing to a total of 4,000 if needed. At that point, 16,000 staff would be needed to run it. Only patients already on ventilators will be admitted. The first should arrive in the coming days.
The idea was dreamt not long ago of having a new hospital, and this London NHS Nightingale Hospital, which was put together its core in 9 days, is a testament to the leadership of the people who stand behind me.
This may eventually become the biggest hospital in Britain. It's an extraordinary achievement to have created it in less than 2 weeks. But now it's open, medical staff have to ready themselves for the harsh reality, the waves of patients that may come in the weeks ahead. It's now become the model for other Nightingale units being set up across the country, including in Birmingham, Bristol, Cardiff and Glasgow. Such is the concern about the potential spread of the virus. There are questions though. Will the unit get enough equipment and staff? And how will they cope if and when the wards start to fill? For now though, Nightingale stands open and ready. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
Well, in the last few minutes, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking. He's released a video which he's put on Twitter, or Downing Street has put on Twitter. The Prime Minister, of course, himself tested positive for coronavirus. Let's hear some of what he's been saying.
Hi folks, quick update from me on the campaign against coronavirus. First of all, in my own case, although I'm feeling better and I've done my 7 days of isolation, alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature, and so in accordance with government advice, I must continue my self-isolation until that symptom itself goes. But we're working clearly the whole time on our programme to defeat the virus. You'll have seen the big announcement yesterday about 100,000 tests per day by the end of the month. And I just want to say one crucial thing, one quick thing to everybody thinking about this weekend and what may be some fine weather, because I reckon a lot of people will be starting to think that this is all going on for quite a long time, and they would rather be getting out there, and particularly if you've got kids in the household, everybody may be getting a bit stir crazy, and there may be just a temptation to get out there, hang out, and start to break the regulations. And I just urge you not to do that.
Our political correspondent Jonathan Blake is at Westminster, and so the Prime Minister himself staying in isolation a bit longer.
Yes, as you saw and heard there, Jane, the Prime Minister not looking or sounding too well at all. And after the recommended 7 days in isolation, he says he still has a temperature, which is one of the key symptoms of coronavirus, and so is following the guidance to stay in isolation for a while longer. Downing Street keen to point out that he is still working and leading the government's efforts against coronavirus. He chaired the daily meeting this morning via video link, but it's undoubtedly difficult to have the Prime Minister remaining in isolation at such a critical time for the government. And for all the talk of testing we've had in the last couple of days, the Prime Minister trying to take it back there to the key message to people to stay inside, especially with the good weather forecast over the next few days and people perhaps getting a bit fed up with those restrictions. On testing, a bit more clarity from the Health Secretary Matt Hancock this morning, saying that 100,000 target per day is going to be reached largely or solely, in fact, by swab tests for people who have coronavirus, with the results given there and then. So the antibody test, which is key, which could tell us if we've already had the virus and will now be immune from it, is not yet ready for public use. That target of 100,000 remains a significant challenge by the government's own admission.
Jonathan Blake, thank you. Well, yes, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock admitting that target, 100,000 people being tested in England by the end of the month, is a huge undertaking. It was announced yesterday after criticism that not enough frontline NHS staff were being tested. Labour has been calling for more details about how the goal will be achieved. Richard Galpin reports.
The country is potentially facing the biggest challenge of this outbreak so far. The peak is expected in just over a week's time on Easter Day, and already infections are surging, doubling every few days, leaving thousands of people in hospital. Testing people for the virus is vital. Key workers, including NHS staff, can find out if they're clear to go to work without the fear of spreading the infection. But the government's facing sharp criticism for failing to scale up the testing programme quickly enough. And yet suddenly, it's now announced it's aiming to increase testing from around 10,000 people a day to 100,000 by the end of the month, raising yet more questions. But the Health Secretary is determined to make it happen.
Well, we've got to. It's a goal, and I've set it for the whole system. The 10,000 a day that we reached on target was from the Public Health England and the NHS working together, incredibly hard work. Firstly, to develop the tests. We were one of the first countries in the world to do that, and then to increase the number.
For those on the front line in the battle to save lives and defeat the coronavirus, maximising testing could make a big difference.
Can't come quickly enough. You know, we're talking to hospital and other health service chief executives every day, and the issue of staff absence is huge for them. You know, staff themselves really want to get back to the front line, and hospital leaders really need those staff on the front line.
To reach 100,000 tests a day will require a massive effort involving industry and laboratories from all around the country, including these recently built mega laboratories. Those in charge of this ramp up claim there'll soon be an exponential increase in the number of people being tested. The test currently in use is a swab test, checking if the person has the virus. There is also a blood test which can prove if someone has previously had the virus and therefore may have some immunity, but it's not yet been approved for use.
The most extravagant claims of some of the manufacturers are for about 90% specificity, which means that there would still be about 1 in 10 positives that would be a false positive, which means that somebody would potentially be given a certificate of immunity when they weren't really immune. But because of that being the nature of those kinds of tests, we may have to learn to live with that degree of risk in the future.
With the peak of the epidemic now just days away, it's been announced that more conference halls and other buildings like this one here in Bristol are to be converted into field hospitals. There'll be at least 6 around the country, providing thousands of extra beds. A measure of what this country could soon face. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
126 people in Scotland have now died after being diagnosed with coronavirus, and the number of people in hospital and intensive care continues to rise.